You're sitting in a room full of people. Voices are loud. Everyone is laughing, talking over each other, sharing stories. But inside, something feels strange. You look around and realize something that others may never notice. The jokes feel forced. The smiles feel thin. The energy in the room feels heavy, like everyone is pretending. And in that moment, you understand why, once again, you're the quiet one in the corner. Not because you can't connect, but because you see too much. If you've ever wondered why you have only a few friends, or maybe none at all, there is a deeper reason behind it. And today we're going to talk about that reason. In fact, there are a few specific traits that powerful empaths carry that slowly change the way friendships form around them. Most people misunderstand these traits. They assume something is wrong with you. But later in this video, I'm going to explain why the very thing that makes you feel isolated at times is also the thing that protects your peace more than anything else. And I'm also going to show you the quiet moment when many empaths stop chasing friendships altogether and suddenly their entire social world shifts. We'll come back to that soon. For now, let's start with something honest. Being an empath means you don't just hear people, you feel them. You feel the tension in their voice, you feel the sadness they try to hide, you feel the insecurity behind their confidence. This level of emotional awareness can be beautiful. It allows you to connect deeply with people who are genuine, but it also means you quickly notice when something isn't real. And here's where many empaths begin to pull back. At first, you try to fit in. You try to overlook the small things. You try to convince yourself that maybe you're overthinking it. Maybe everyone has moments of insincerity. Maybe this is just how social life works. So you try harder. You show up more. You listen more. You give more. And slowly, something strange begins to happen. The more you chase connection, the less respected you feel. This is not because you are weak. It is because chasing quietly lowers your position in any relationship. When you constantly reach out first, constantly adjust your energy, constantly make space for others without asking for the same in return, people begin to see your presence as something that will always be available. And when something is always available, people stop valuing it. This is a difficult truth, but it is an important one. Attention flows toward what stands still. When you understand that line, something inside you begins to shift. Many empaths spend years trying to hold friendships together. You send the message first. You check in when others disappear. You make excuses for their behavior. You tell yourself they're just busy or distracted. But deep down you feel the imbalance. And one day something inside you becomes tired. Not angry, not bitter, just clear. You stop reaching out. Now here's where the emotional challenge begins, because silence feels uncomfortable at first. The moment you stop texting, stop checking in, stop trying to maintain the connection, your mind begins to question everything. You wonder if the friendship will disappear. You wonder if they will think you don't care. You wonder if you're making a mistake. Silence feels heavy because you're breaking a pattern your nervous system has repeated for years. The urge to reconnect, to smooth things over, to restore the old rhythm becomes very strong. But here's what most people never realize. Silence reveals the truth of every connection. When you step back, the relationships around you begin to show their real shape. Some people notice the distance and move closer. They reach out. They ask how you're doing. They make an effort. Others stay quiet. And their silence tells you something important about the level of investment they truly had. This moment can feel painful at first, but it is also incredibly powerful. Because instead of spending years guessing who values your presence, you begin to see it clearly. Attention flows toward what stands still. When you stop chasing, the emotional space changes. You are no longer pouring energy outward hoping it will return. Instead, you are observing who naturally steps forward. This is one of the hidden traits of empaths who end up with very small social circles. They eventually stop forcing connections, not because they hate people, not because they think they are better than others, but because their emotional awareness becomes too strong to ignore the imbalance anymore. And something even more interesting happens during this stage. Many of the friendships that once surrounded you begin to fade. Not with drama, not with conflict, just quietly. People who were comfortable with your constant effort begin to drift away when that effort stops. At first, this can feel like loss. But later, you realize something deeper was actually happening. You weren't losing real connection. You were clearing emotional noise. And in the next part of this conversation, we're going to explore something most empaths never fully understand. We're going to look at the psychology of what actually happens inside other people's minds when you stop chasing friendships, and why stepping back often changes the entire social dynamic around you. When you step back from people, something subtle but powerful begins to happen inside their minds. At first, most people don't consciously notice it. They just feel a small shift in the emotional atmosphere. The usual message from you doesn't arrive. The check and they were used to receiving is suddenly missing. The quiet effort you always made is no longer there. And this is where the psychology begins to change. Human attention works in a very predictable way. We naturally move toward what feels stable and self-contained. When someone is constantly reaching for us, our minds quietly place them in the category of certainty. We assume they will always be there, not because we are cruel, but because the brain saves energy by focusing on what feels uncertain or new. But when you step back, that certainty disappears. The person who once filled the emotional space suddenly becomes still. That stillness creates a kind of curiosity in the mind. People begin to wonder what changed. They may check your social media. They may think about you more than before. They may even feel a subtle sense of absence they didn't expect. This is why stepping back shifts the emotional balance of a relationship. It interrupts the pattern that people had grown comfortable with. The dynamic that once required your effort now requires theirs. And for some people, that moment reveals whether they truly value the connection or were simply enjoying the convenience of your attention. Attention flows toward what stands still. When you understand this, you stop seeing silence as rejection. Instead, you begin to see it as information. It shows you who naturally moves closer when the dynamic becomes balanced. But let's be honest about something. Knowing this psychologically is one thing. Living it emotionally is another, because the urge to reach out can become very strong. You pick up your phone and feel the impulse to send a quick message. Just something simple, just a small check-in. Your mind tries to convince you that it would only take a few seconds. This urge is not weakness, it is your nervous system trying to return to a familiar pattern. For a long time, reaching out was how you managed uncertainty. It was how you kept the connection alive. So when the silence appears, your mind wants to repair it immediately. The key is not to fight the urge aggressively. The key is to create space around it. One simple practice helps more than people realize. When you feel the urge to text or call, pause for 10 minutes. Not forever. Just 10 minutes. Put the phone down and breathe slowly. Let the emotional wave pass through your body instead of reacting to it immediately. Most urges lose their power when you give them time. Another helpful step is writing the message instead of sending it. Open a note on your phone and type everything you want to say. Let the thoughts flow without censoring them. Often you'll notice something interesting happen. Once the words are out of your head, the pressure to send them begins to fade. You realize the urge was more about releasing emotion than actually communicating. And during this time, something deeper is forming inside you. Self-respect. Attention flows toward what stands still. The more you practice pausing instead of chasing, the more stable your emotional energy becomes. You stop reacting to every moment of distance. You stop trying to control how people respond to you. Instead, you begin focusing on something much more important, your own life. Many empaths spend years directing most of their emotional energy outward. You support others, you listen deeply. You care about how everyone around you feels, but very rarely do you invest that same attention into yourself. Stepping back from chasing friendships creates an unexpected opportunity. The time and emotional space you once spent trying to maintain connections suddenly becomes available. Now the question becomes simple. What do you do with that energy? This is where powerful empaths begin to grow in ways that others don't expect. Instead of constantly monitoring relationships, you begin strengthening the foundation of your own life. You move your body more often. You take walks without checking your phone. You read, learn, and explore ideas that expand your mind. You build routines that stabilize your emotional health. You invest time in skills, creativity, and personal growth. Something beautiful happens when you do this consistently. Your sense of identity stops depending on who is responding to you. You are no longer waiting for connection to feel whole. You are creating a life that already feels grounded and meaningful. And ironically, this is the stage where healthier friendships often begin to appear. Not because you were chasing them, but because your energy has changed. People feel the difference between someone who is seeking validation and someone who is simply living with quiet confidence. Attention flows toward what stands still. When you hold your position calmly, relationships reorganize themselves around that stability. Some people will move closer, others will fade away. Both outcomes are valuable, because in the next part of this conversation, we're going to explore what happens when the silence finally delivers its answer, whether someone returns to the connection, or whether the quiet space becomes the beginning of an entirely new chapter in your life. Eventually, the silence gives you an answer. It may not come immediately. Sometimes it takes days, sometimes weeks. But every relationship eventually responds to space in one of two ways. Either the person notices your absence and begins to move toward you again, or the silence continues and the connection quietly fades. Both outcomes reveal something important. Let's start with the first possibility. Sometimes people come back. You might receive a message you weren't expecting. Maybe it's casual, like nothing ever happened. Maybe it's thoughtful and curious, asking how you've been. In that moment, it's easy to feel relief. Part of you may want to rush back into the connection and restore the old rhythm. But this is where your growth matters. Because stepping back was never about making someone chase you. It was about creating a healthier dynamic. And if someone returns, the way you respond will determine whether the relationship actually changes or simply repeats the old pattern. So you slow down. You don't rush to fill every gap with conversation. You allow the connection to rebuild gradually. This pace gives you time to observe something very important: consistency. Anyone can send a message. Anyone can say the right words for a moment. But real connection is revealed through repeated effort over time. Watch their actions carefully. Do they show genuine interest in maintaining the friendship, or are they simply reacting to your temporary distance? This is where boundaries come in. Boundaries are not punishments, they are clarity. They show people how to treat you by demonstrating what you will and will not accept in your life. If the person begins to reconnect with respect, effort, and honesty, you allow the friendship to grow again slowly. But if the same imbalance returns, you recognize it much earlier than before. Attention flows toward what stands still. That spine line becomes your reminder that you don't have to chase or prove your worth to anyone. When you hold your emotional ground, people who truly value you will meet you there. Now let's talk about the other outcome. Sometimes the silence continues, no message arrives, no effort appears. Days stretch into weeks, and the connection simply fades in the background of your life. At first, this can feel like rejection. The mind tries to search for explanations. You may wonder if you did something wrong or if you should have tried harder to keep the friendship alive. But over time, a deeper understanding begins to settle in. Silence reveals truth either way. When someone genuinely values your presence, distance usually motivates them to reconnect. They notice the absence and feel curious about it. They reach out because the relationship matters to them. When someone remains silent, their lack of response becomes the answer. And this is where dignity becomes powerful. You don't chase closure, you don't demand explanations. You accept the message their actions already delivered. That acceptance allows you to move forward with your energy intact rather than draining it trying to solve a puzzle that was never yours to solve. Attention flows toward what stands still. When you stay grounded in that truth, something unexpected happens. The loneliness many empaths fear begins to transform into something different: peace. Because you are no longer surrounding yourself with connections that only exist through your effort. The social noise fades, and what remains is space for more authentic relationships to eventually appear. Let's take a moment to summarize everything we've explored. Many empaths end up with very few friends, not because they lack kindness or connection, but because their emotional awareness becomes too strong to ignore and balance. When you constantly chase friendships, your effort becomes expected rather than appreciated. Stepping back interrupts that pattern and allows the true level of investment in the relationship to reveal itself. If someone returns, you respond with boundaries, patience, and clear standards. You observe consistency before rebuilding closeness. If they don't return, you accept the message their silence delivered and move forward with dignity. Either way, silence reveals truth. And the more you trust that truth, the less energy you waste trying to force connections that were never balanced to begin with. Now here is one simple action you can take starting today. The next time you feel the urge to chase a friendship that feels one-sided, pause before acting. Give yourself 24 hours before sending the message or making the call. During that time, invest your energy in something that strengthens you. Go for a walk, write your thoughts down, work on something meaningful in your life. That small pause changes more than you might expect, because each time you choose calm, self-respect instead of emotional urgency, you strengthen the most important relationship you will ever have, the one you have with yourself. And when that relationship becomes stable, the right people naturally begin to recognize your value without you having to convince them. Stand calmly in your own energy. Protect your peace. Let your presence be something people meet with equal effort, rather than something they simply receive without thought. And if you want to understand another powerful trait that makes empaths different from most people in relationship, watch the next video where we explore the quiet behavior that instantly reveals when someone truly respects your energy.